Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here to present the chart of Kamala Harris. We're going to look at both her natal chart and a chart at the time of the inauguration. Since she became the VP pick, I thought it might be a good way to perhaps predict how this election could go, but also just to look at what's going on at that time for her, and maybe just looking at what kind of leader she might be. So before I get to that, I just want to say thank you to all of my followers and subscribers, whether it's my newsletter, my website, or this channel. Thank you guys for allowing me to come into your lives and continue to share and like and do all those things that you do. I love hearing from you. So with that said, let's go and jump in and look at this chart. So as always, whenever you push a button, everything changes. So here we have the chart. And I want to point out, this is a really interesting chart, and I'm going to get to that with the asteroids, but I thought we would start by looking at the very simple chart on the Janus program. I want to point out that out of the 4 angles, she's got very close aspects to 3 of them with personal points and planets. So that's really interesting. That does also mean that she does make those, she's an important person, or she makes established, in this case, connections. Okay? Now, Saturn connections also tell us that they could be older. She may be somebody who really respected her teachers, her authorities, and people that were above her. And I also feel like something else that helps make her a unique character, besides the nodes and Saturn being so close, and I mean, you're talking 5 minutes on this ascendant and descendant. You're talking literally 5 minutes. The nodes have passed over by only 5 minutes. That's amazing. Here, we are looking at something that's more like 4 degrees, but we know that we can go 10 degrees on either side, so it is definitely still an aspect. Down here, no, it is not an aspect, though having this configuration of Venus, Pluto, and Uranus is really an interesting one in her chart, and it's actually kind of an interesting her Venus is your relationships, and also money, and how it can be transformative, or how through her own transformations, and even through, because look at that, Pluto is the midpoint of Uranus and Venus. You know, Uranus and Venus is things that transform her. Okay, freedom, unpredictability, and friends. Remember, connections are really important to her in this lifetime. So this is really cool. This also talks about this how unique her parents were, and unique upbringing, and I find that to be fascinating as well. This is like I said, a very interesting chart to start with. Now, I'm going to jump immediately to the asteroids and to the dial, and to the dial in particular, and we can't do that on Janus. So I'm going to move over to Solar Fire here, and I'm going to pull up her chart. Well, the dial is something I want to look at, but let's wait for a minute to get there. Let's first look at these angles. And here, when you pull in and this is why I love and if I'm showing you anything today, I'm showing you how much detail asteroids provide. Okay? Look at this. Not only are the nodes there within 5 minutes, but within minutes, within 20 some minutes, you've got Industria. We've got Melopine, which is when it's sort of like somebody who's very, very productive. Now, Melopine is an asteroid that also talks about how she's like the person who, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Because Melopine is an asteroid of things that kind of maybe are going downhill. So she really kicks it in. Now, we're going to talk about this a lot, because now Minerva, though retrograde, is also right there. And Minerva is one of what I would refer to as the politician asteroid. So she is a politician from the very get-go. It also refers to endings. So it is interesting how this will play into her as a politician. The endings idea. Is she somebody's coming in to help transform things, maybe end certain things? I don't know. So I can't, that I don't really know. I can say though that um, I believe that she is somebody in her lifetime who's been surprised by prejudice by what I see here. And I'm not going to go into that too much, but again, when you start adding in these asteroids, realize that, and a lot of the prejudice could have even, it's directed toward her kind, but maybe even her mother. So, because of the Sears there. So, you're, and again, I don't want to go into it too much. I also feel that that just really gets her going with Volcanus there. And so, which is like the person who does want to come in from a strong position. So she works on that. She makes strong statements. That's what she does. So really interesting ascendant. When you look at her midheaven, because these to me are the two most important, and the rest are important too because they're aspecting as well those points. But I always start here. You see, this is a very focused person. So this is like a very productive, focused person. And things, she's always working on problems that are not easily resolved. And I do think that she does and is victorious in her endeavors with that. So that's good to see if she's going to be working for our government, that she is actually good at it. I do believe that at times she has to withdraw and distance herself from that. But at Saturn, again, discipline, organization, executive ability, she's really focused on that. So even if she didn't come in with those skills, she's working on them because Vesta is running right there. And Vesta, by the way, is on that midheaven within minutes. So adding again to the interest, remember the node was in a few minutes, so is Industria, Melopine. So you're talking about somebody who has a lot of stuff right on them, right there. It also refers to this wanting to serve. The problem is that there's a fine line between wanting to serve and wanting to enable. I think that with Pallas, I'm sorry, this is Minerva. I'm going to get to Pallas in a second. I'm jumping. Here with Minerva, even in retrograde, I believe that it is to serve, which I think at times for her can be oppressive, or that can be, it's through who she's serving. And I think that that's a big, I always say that about Hebe in general, this asteroid, that it really does come from this place of wanting to please. Just like, okay, Pallas, which is here, I was getting there, and Minerva, which is right off the ascendant. So you have this person who wants to, but sometimes what happens is it sets them up so that they maybe are serving the wrong people, or they're not, they have to learn that as a lesson with that South Node there. The Icarus and the Aragon also, I think that through her life, she's watched that when you take too big of a risk, it can become self-destructive. Well, particularly if you are in politics. I think that's interesting because that's right on the ascendant descendant. I'm just having a conversation that has probably gone on in her head. Now, as we look at this angle, we pick up the trans-Neptunian Zeus. So all of her angles are lit up. Okay, I had to point that out. I had to jump in there because I wanted so much to start with that, and I couldn't, because when you look at the plane chart, you only see 3 angles lit up. When you pull up the trans-Neptunians, asteroids, boy, they really, Christmas tree, they light up. So here we have quite a few. It's, I think that she's a very proud person, and I think that she's very easily excitable, but she has a good ability to restrain herself. And that means even when she's excited, you might not know, maybe if you get to know her, but I think that her ability to restrain herself is strong. So as we continue to look at these, and I do apologize, I had to go on to pause. I have a men working outside as usual. But as we look at these asteroids down here, and we were down at the IC, the it's really, look at, there's just, I would say a very serious person here, very serious child, I would imagine. But then again, like I said, this Zeus, excitement, restraining, especially in the case of when one is really excited, pride. But then when you look at this prejudiced, so, and dependency plays in here too as well. So it really it's almost as though for her, maybe things did as a child start slowly. So, or there is this sense that, at least from her own perspective, that things go slow. I don't think they really do. She's achieved a lot. She'll probably achieve a lot more, especially with Zeus down here on the IC. So Zeus is excitement. It's also constraint, restraint, but without Zeus, you don't have the excitement. You can't generate the excitement to sell it to others, to invigorate others. And so she's got Zeus, so inflame others, as the case may be. So she really has a good chart. And I definitely want to show that. Now, I'm going to go into the dial because there are some things in the dial that when I compare them, particularly to the secondary progressed, particularly this, you can tell I've been doing this a couple times, particularly as we look at, if you go across the way, you have to wiggle a bit to get to that Poseidon, but they actually are fairly close, particularly because they're trans-Neptunians and they move really, really slow. There is a visually, you can see how they could inspire one another. And I do believe that's part of why she became a lawyer. Okay, Poseidon and Zeus. Poseidon is education, and media, it's learning, it's propaganda, it's a lot of things, but it's also enlightenment. And Kronos is, of course, the leader, the highest level. So it's no surprise there when I saw that. When we get to inauguration, around the time of the inauguration, that is actually closer together. So we're going to look at that. But I want to point out here this Jupiter-Uranus, that, there's a lot of luck for her. Maybe it's sudden even with leaders or as a leader. So, and also a lot of energy into transformation. Really good chart for a leader that would be, I'm going to say, not change the world, but really is ready to change things. Okay, and I'm wondering if it was the inauguration chart, one of them. Here we have, remember that she does this. That is her chart. That she actually does look at problems, or Saturn, things that require discipline and structure. They're not easy to resolve. Astrea, they're ongoing even in many cases because they're constantly transforming. And so there's your panacea. We're always solving problems here, very close to Astrea, but there's victory with it. So I think that is a very hopeful concept. I apologize for the noise. I do live, my office, I should say, is off of a street. I live in this place too, but I actually have an office, and it is literally on the main street, so it gets loud, and I do apologize. So as we see this in the midheaven, okay, we go back to our dial. That's really exciting to see, because it's what I refer to, what we're already starting to see in this chart as we look at her, particularly as a leader, is this idea of working, okay, that she is somebody who will work. How it'll go, I don't know, but the work is transformational. That's what she's working on, probably why she's here. So, and I love that Nike's on the end of this, just do it. Just do it. And I do think that she ultimately gets tired and fatigued and, could even have some kind of pain as a result of that fatigue. Okay, I'm not saying she has Epstein-Barr or something along those lines. I don't know, and I'm not going to look at her chart for that because it's none of my business. But what I'm getting at is no matter how hard it is, she's continuing to do it. Just do it. I think that's the moral of the story here. Now, the next thing I'm going to point out in here, in the dial, because Kronos falls in the 12th house. Okay, we'll just quickly take a moment. It falls in the 12th house of this chart. Now, out of sign from Jupiter. Okay, just far enough, I should say, away from Jupiter. But it's close. Okay, I mean, they're both in the 12th house. Up here, okay, a little bit further away in the ascendant, you have a lot of karma. So which is only 3 degrees away, and that is an aspect. Okay, this is 9 degrees away. It's barely, and not really, because both of them are rather slow moving. So I wouldn't look at it that way. But you get this idea of somebody coming at Kronos leadership from the back room. This is not, and it's interesting because remember that she's going in as a vice president, not a president. Backdoor. Okay, so I had to point that out. I thought that was really interesting. Oh yeah, how about that? But with the both of them being there, I think that she has a lot of the right spirit for Kronos. I think that adds to Kronos a lot. Also, again, the lawyer. So as we go back to the dial, I digress. We go back to the dial, because astrology is so much fun, we see here the Kronos, we see as I said before, look at this. This is where I was at, and I kind of got lost in myself. I had to go back to a little bit before where I was. So in here, we have a 2230 aspect, okay? It's actually not this one, although I do want to point out that's within degree, and it is the ascendant, okay? The ascendant, okay? So if we go, okay, that's where we saw the red lines, okay? That's the ascendant. But where we're actually 2230 is the node. Remember that the node and ascendant are close, okay? So our node and our ascendant are very, very close. And Kronos is in that axis, which means Kronos is a part of the ascendant, which means that here we go again is, even though it's coming from the 12th, the back door, she's here to be a leader. She is here to lead. Oh, that is so very, very cool. I mean, she is already, but look at this. Jupiter Sun to the node. That's also making some good connections. Well, she's running with Joe Biden, and his chances of winning are very, very good. So there's luck through that, okay? That is very fortunate. The whole thing, though, equals Kronos. Now, the moon and Jupiter, and by the way, it's also then the sun and Jupiter. For some reason, I might not be. Let me go back. Sun and Jupiter. There it is. So both of the sun and the moon are now in the axis with the node in Kronos axis. Boy, I hope that wasn't too confusing. Because this is something we can fold again. We're looking at 2230, 22 degrees, 30 minutes. And believe me, you now want to have tighter orbs. And these are all fine. We're in it, okay? This all is, it's showing up, it's working. So 2230 is a part of the axis. The stronger part of the axis, of course, would be the direct. But, ironically, Kronos from the 12th, okay, vice president, I mean, should I go on? We have Jupiter and Sun, or Moon, Jupiter, Sun, Jupiter, in the nodal axis, in this axis. I'm pointing to it like you can see that. I should start using my cursor. I apologize. I'm too excited. So, and considering how many times I've done this video because of noise and other things, I am still excited. I think that this and we'll look at it, but she has a really good chart. She has a really, really good chart for being a leader. So let's move on. I'm going to stay with the charts on solar fire because I haven't mastered the dial yet. And a lot of what we're really looking at is on the dial. I could go back and look in the wheel, and but it's the dial stuff that's really exciting me. You know, her secondary progressed midheaven is midheaven equals sun chronos. That is so phenomenal. Okay, so at the inauguration, her midheaven for her secondary progressed chart is the secondary progressed being she's aged, she's wiser, this is where she is right now, is incredible. She is looking, sun chronos is a leader, her future as a leader. Anyway, I'm happy. It was very exciting for me. It still is the umpteenth time later because of having to do this over, but I honestly and truly am still so excited about it. So it's a really wonderful chart. Let's look at it in wheel form, particularly for people who are not adjusted to yet looking at dials. Okay, so I'm not going to bother looking at the, do I have it? You know what? Hold on 1 minute. I'll pull it up. Okay, so let me get it back because, you know, this thing just jumps. Okay, so here I did pull it up. I wanted us to be able to look at it in a simpler format. This was really interesting to me because it's not right on the midheaven, but I still think of the moon in the 10th as a recognition. Jupiter, that is just fabulous. That's her progressed Jupiter. So it is retrograde, but it does mean an opportunity to expand, but it's who she is. But that's awesome. It's also in politics, or in government, by the way, which is Jupiter. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, it does oppose Venus and Jupiter in the fourth. Fourth is a house of healing. That's how I look at it. So that, is something that at this time she is looking at with regard to, that's a disappointment, by the way. What that disappointment could be, in a number of things because of the South Node Sun and even Mercury, but South Node Sun in particular, look how close, okay? So there could be some sort of thing going on. I'm going to say with a male. It could even be Vice President President Joe Biden. So I've done this too many times. This is interesting, and I'm not going to throw it out there to mean anything. I think that this particular vice president was very, very important because there were many people concerned about the health of Joe Biden. Also, just about the energy level. I mean, when somebody becomes nocturian, okay, which is the 80-year-olds, you have to look at the energy level. And I can honestly say that as somebody who's not there, okay, but where I am, I can tell the difference. Just where I was, there was a dancer once. I mean, I think that says a lot. So the reality is that here we have, this, I think, disappointment. And then if you go to the fifth house and you see that little configuration going on its own, okay, it does, however, this little configuration trines her midheaven. So this South Node Sun isn't bad for her. I don't think it will be either, but it does speak to the importance of this particular candidate, that when she was chosen, why it took months, why it was so important. It really was. Apparently it was. It's being verified. A couple things. Look at this. Now, this is the secondary progressed chart. This is like you've gotten older now. And look at this. Okay, so we see this 0 degrees, 53 minutes. So the house has just begin its journey through that sign, okay? In this case, Virgo is now beginning to take over that second house cusp. Well, actually, it's been holding on to it because of what it was, but it's still Virgo. It's a double. I don't know if you can see that, but look at this. These houses right here. But this is interesting because this represents an ingress of Saturn. So I wasn't really getting, the house cusp changing is very important. Yes, it is. But what makes it more so is this Saturn, okay? And that Saturn is in ingress. Must be a day to ride your motorcycle. Let me go back to that. So the ingress of this Saturn, this is so cool, okay? So cool. That's not the only thing that's ingressing, okay? So has Mercury within 12 minutes ingressed into Capricorn. Her life is changing. She's changing, okay? Does look good for governmental change in the election, that, or if she doesn't win, something else is happening. Sorry for the noise. It's at a point in the day now where traffic is going to get bad, and I'll just have to pause it if it gets too bad. So this is already, look at this in the second house, which again is this Virgo, okay? So Virgo here, ruling cusp of the second house, of course, is ruled by Mercury, which is ingressing into Capricorn. But look at this. Her figures that were over here at one time in this house have now moved to the second house, the house of values. Okay? So there's some interesting things at play when January takes over. So let's look at this in another light. So I'm going to pull up the secondary progress chart once again, move it to a dial. Okay, so I'm going to just go back to that dial. Now, we had saw the midheaven and look at Chronos Sun equals that that's just awesome, by the way. But I wanted to show you this. So here we have that is now a direct connection with, look at this, Jupiter Mars, which is fortunate actions. And actions, when you're also talking about the moon, it's also the general public, and in this kind of role, that has to mean something. So that really is heartening because the actions, the fortunate actions, would be taken for the general public. Also because the general public is angry. It also bodes well for her being able to put forward her own agenda, which I think is also very important, okay? Now, remember how the node was up. Now the sun is, and it equals, that's right, this ascendant. Okay, so that's really interesting, isn't it? Because of how strong the node was in her chart. So there are certain things that really stood out in this. And one of them is that it's an ascendant sun that equals a Cupido Chronos, which Cupido stands for the party and the party in charge. When I looked at her chart, one of the most important things that I was able to read was that it really does look like the whole government will become blue. That it won't just be the president, and it won't just be the House, and it won't just be the House and the president. That somewhere along the line that the Democrats might, from the look of her chart, because you can see it in two places in this chart, and this is January's chart for her. So I'm only reading it through her sunglasses, but it looks like there's a Cupido Chronos and a Pallas Vesta Chiron, which means it's also something she was focused in was a goal, and particularly as a senator, I'm sure it would be, that the politics, the palace, has a change or a turning point. And Cupido Chronos is my party leadership. That's how I work with keywords. I hope that was of interest to people. I'm actually going to leave it there. I hope that that was interesting enough. I was really interested in it even the 12th time I went through it. But let me come back. Let's come back here. Let me just come back to you. I hope that was of interest. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like private work done, contact me through the website, divinationcounselingservice.org. I'd love to hear from you. But I hope that was something that was of value to you, and that after this video clip, you have a little bit more understanding of how the asteroids and the dial bring in more detail about the subject matter. So I'm going to leave it there. So until we meet again, as always, happy readings.